Durham University has become a focal point of the student housing crisis. At PalTV, we reported on the now infamous queues outside estate agents in Durham. Students were camping out overnight in order to secure housing, not for the year that had just begun, but for the next academic year. Worsened by the ongoing cost of living crunch and high demand, renting prices in the city have soared this year, with 87% of student housing costing more than £140 and 37% costing more than £200. Durham is now one of the most expensive cities for students to live in the north of England. Durham's student population has swollen in the last 3 decades from just 6,500 in 1990 to 1991 to hitting the 20,000 mark in the 2020 and 21 academic year. With the university strategy plan set to be completed in 2027, aiming to add another 4 to 6 colleges, many have questioned if further crises like the one just witnessed are inevitable in the future. In this video, we'll be diving into the key events surrounding the student housing crisis and what exactly caused this headline-grabbing situation. At just 9:30 p.m. on Sunday the 23rd of October, PalTV arrived at the scene of a growing queue of students outside 2 major estate agents in Durham. This is what we saw.
You were willing to camp out the entire night out to find housing?
Because otherwise we won't have anywhere to live. That's about it, really.
Right, so we got here about 20 minutes ago, so it's like 20 to 11 now. So we'll probably be here till 9 in the morning when it opens, yeah. So our friends got here at 6 p.m. We've got here about 10 o'clock.
So you guys are doing it in shifts. How is that going to work tonight?
Well, I think our friends are going to come back at about 1, and then the rest of the night we're going to get a car, like one of our cars, and like take it in turns. Sleep in the car for like an hour.
My opinion on this is I currently live in Gilesgate, okay, and the issue with Gilesgate is not the distance right now, it's the fact that there's no bus route directly to the science site. I feel like Gilesgate would be a much better option if there was a proper bus route, and that's the only major thing stopping a lot of people from going. Because the issue is, currently there's a bus that goes into town and the bus that comes from town to the science site, and they're awful and they're always late, so if you get one you miss the other one, and so you just can't get to things without walking or cycling.
So we live 3 Church Street, so just up the road, and we just saw, I'm on Palatinate, news reporter, and someone sent in a picture of the queue, and we just leant outside our window, had a look, and it was just insane, and we felt so bad being in our beds when people are out here freezing. It's going to get to like just above freezing, and people are out here.
Welcome to PalTV. Clocks have just hit 9 a.m. and lectures have just started, and letting agents have opened to deal with the housing crisis that has been unfolding since last night.
So we spoke to you last night. How are you doing now that you're a little bit further on in the queue?
Just glad to be closer, just happy to be there, yeah.
Yeah. How long have you been waiting now? Do you know how many hours it's been?
We got here at 10:30 and it's currently 8, so
quite a while.
9.5 hours.
About 3:30, so what's that? 5 hours now?
It's about 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I'm about the same.
Yeah, just sat on the ground.
Like wet.
It's been pretty cold. Couldn't really get any sleep, so we just watched a film instead.
Yeah, and then spent like the past hour or 2 just trying to scour any websites we can to find anything that's still available.
How have you been keeping yourselves occupied?
It's been hard.
Yeah, literally just that.
8 hours? We've been here since about
1 a.m. I've been on the ground with my Hope Estates chair.
Yeah.
And we've been sleeping and
I've not been sleeping. It's been rough. It's been rough.
Yeah.
But we've been about 8 hours.
Well, we
got there at 10:30. Yeah. And then we stayed until we took shifts. We stayed until 3.
Yeah.
And then the 2 girls we were going to live with showed up and said they're going to live as a 2 at 3 a.m. this morning.
Yeah.
And then we went back, had a few crisis chats, and decided that we're going to sign a 4-person house, the 2 of us, and then add 2 people on later.
Yeah. So it was, we were a group of 4, and we were going to take turns sitting in the queue all night. And then when they came to relieve us, they told us that they found 2 beds. They were just ditching us basically, and at 3 a.m. And so we were like, okay, went home, figured it out, came back, and had to stand in line next to them. And we have a house now, so we just have to find roommates.
Like, my house this year is going up £70 a week. It's ridiculous.
That is absurd.
Because it's a 10-person house, they're asking basically for £3,000 extra a month, and there's no way energy prices are going up that much that they're paying £3,000 extra a month.
This blanket only arrived about 2 hours ago.
Yeah, same with this one. We were like shivering.
I didn't think it was going to be that cold. I've got like 3 layers on, like top and bottom.
I've got a big duvet coat on and it's still freezing.
Yeah, it's freezing. It was like fine until about like 5,
and then it really got cold.
It's like the floor is so cold. Yeah.
Like, obviously, it's a pretty grim situation, and like, we don't really want to think about it like that. We're just, trying to make the best out of it, really.
So we run Durham Tenants Union Society. It's a society at the university where we give advice to tenants and also people living in college regarding their tenants' rights. But considering how easy it is for landlords to exploit students, given the current housing crisis and market, it's very important that they at least have awareness of this information. Without, university action against the housing problems, this is the kind of best we can do to make sure people aren't getting exploited as much. But obviously the high rents and stuff are still very exploitative, which we can't do much about.
So who do you think is responsible then for the housing crisis? You mentioned the university. Is there anybody else that you think is responsible?
It's just a catalogue of issues by various levels. The main problem is the marketisation of education, which has led to a change from the university models from being centred on education to being centred on expansion and competitiveness. But the university can't really put all the blame on national policy and stuff, because the university are still pushing these policies. When the Vice-Chancellor and their various buildings, again, pay rises and refurbishments year on year, it's very hard to believe that they're really putting students first. And also the landlords know this situation is really easy to exploit. They know that the rents they're charging are incredibly high, yet they're still doing it.
And we've been seeing queues for different estate agents over the past week, but on my walk to work today, this is the worst I've seen it. This is the worst I've ever seen it at Durham. We've been talking to the Vice-Chancellor and the MP, Mary Foy, about the housing situation, and it looks like there is progress in terms of getting the working group sorted, but in terms of making that a success, we need to keep applying that pressure onto the uni, being this is a long-term issue that needs long-term solutions. It's got to a point where they keep bringing more people in, where the amount of housing that's in Durham can't sustain that. And normally each year there'd be a few more houses before the start of term, so people who want to live out during the first year or can't afford to live in during the first year have that option. But this was the first year where student housing essentially ran out before the start of term. They're not the only players that, of course, estate agents releasing the properties as early as they have. That is a huge issue, but still the university can't ignore the role that they played in it. Yeah.
These scenes caused quite a stir in the media and were picked up by both local and national media outlets. It's unsurprising then that national news were present to record footage of a student housing protest which occurred just 4 days later on the 28th of October, demanding the university take action to protect students from homelessness next year.
And we have been hearing about these problems long before this crisis has even started. This is unfortunately just the accumulation of years of inaction, not only by the university, but by the estate agents and the private landlords in Durham, who not only know exactly what they're doing, but they're making lots of money off it and off our backs, but also off the backs of the local community, and they are also exploiting. I'm sure I asked every single one of you here today about the rise in rent costs, especially if some of you are already rented in Durham. We're looking at rent increases way out of line with inflation. We're looking at anywhere from 20% to some of the more than 110% rent increases this year alone.
Student housing right now is an existential crisis. This is a huge issue, and students are going to be made homeless this year unless urgent action is taken. So I think this is a fantastic opportunity to give a clear message to university management that enough is enough and action needs to be taken.
What specifically are the SU doing to help students?
We're lobbying the university. We're making our demands known. We have a lot of seats and management, and we're looking to get involved in campaigns like this. And right now it's about escalation. This is going to escalate, and we want students to be at the forefront of it to put a clear message to management. I would like to see them lower admission rates. They can't carry on letting in more and more students knowing that there aren't houses. I want the university to admit they've got a responsibility over student housing, and that making sure students are fed and housed is a responsibility of theirs, and they can't continue to let students down.
Throughout this time, Durham University student Luke Nash took it upon himself to update students on the housing situation within the city via the university-wide Facebook group Overheard at Durham University. We sat down with him to discuss how he's been helping students out.
I've been drafting some posts on Overheard at Durham University, which is a local Facebook group that uni students use. And my main aim of that has been to help students find housing when they've otherwise been struggling and get information out that otherwise hasn't been disseminated during this whole situation. So I figured I'd just cobble something, 10 minutes long, just giving the basic information of what's going on and send it out. And if it helps a couple of people, then I've done my job. Also had about 350 reactions, and I had people messaging me saying how helpful it was. And from there, I just thought, why not? I might as well put out a couple more whilst the situation keeps evolving. There are people that are paid to do what I did. Admittedly, it didn't take me very long. Sort of all in all, I probably spent maybe an hour related to those posts. But, there are people sat in offices around the uni whose job it is to make sure their students are safe and not stressed, and that their welfare is sort of the paramount importance. It's not my responsibility to make sure that people have houses for next year and that they have the adequate information to do so. But yes, there are other parties at play. The county council hasn't made a brilliant case for itself. But I think squarely, this was coming. We knew it was coming. The timing, I blame Central University Management because of the overprescription issues. And I don't buy the excuse of them blaming COVID, because every university, every Russell Group university and every other university across the country has had COVID-related admittance issues. It's only in Durham where we're seeing a high housing crisis of this scale. There's words coming out of Glasgow that they're a little bit struggling for spaces, but nothing near the level we're at here. However, it would be remiss of me to not pin some of the blame on letting agents in Durham. So the price gouging we knew was coming. We knew there was going to come a time when prices were going to hit this high. And we knew there was a time when we were going to be struggling for supply. And that's probably where I'd primarily sort of put the council's share of the blame would go towards that. But they capitalised on a deeply stressful situation. I think what we'll need to do is what other universities do, and that's ban letting agents from advertising properties before an arbitrary date later in the year. I think I was saying that I think I was hearing from Glasgow that most people don't sign until June, which would obviously be just a lot better, because then what happens is during the year you've got time to properly get information out to students, especially new students, about what's going on with accommodation. Is there enough? What are your options? How can you sign smartly and properly? And it also gives the university time to figure out, okay, do we have enough space for all of our students? And if the answer is no, then you've got time to build solutions in and not rush into it in October and then try and fix the mess that comes later on. That's not the right way of doing it.
So we've been hearing a lot about students' own experiences of the housing crisis, but let's place that in context. We spoke to 3 members of Palatinate who have researched the scope and causes of the housing crisis.
So what we've seen in Durham is basically the housing market exploding. While we've seen every year that it's been moved earlier and earlier, we've never had this kind of price increase. So what at Palatinate we wanted to do, not only monitor the situation, we wanted to actually look at the numbers and see how bizarre Durham was compared to other places in the country. Because obviously what we thought is was this just going to be a byproduct of the cost of living crisis? We've all seen our shopping bills, they've all gone up. Why we shouldn't have expected the same for housing. However, when you look at the numbers and you compare Durham to other northern cities, Durham is actually one of the most expensive student cities in the north. Compared to Newcastle, which is 15 minutes down the road, the comparison is ridiculous. In Durham, we found out that 87% of the houses were over £140 per person per week. In Newcastle, only 9% of the houses are over £140 per person per week. And it's not like we're talking about a massive different area with different kind of socioeconomic issues.
We first heard about problems when there were visible queues outside one of the estate agents in the city. So we thought it was necessary to go down the following week when we knew there would be many housing drops from estate agents to witness if the queues were going to be as bad on the next occasion. It turned out they were in fact worse, and hundreds of people were queuing up, forced to sign on the pavement, on the window, purely to avoid having to pay extortionate prices. Many people blame the university for this outcome, and they thought that if they didn't queue up and miss lectures, or in some cases queue overnight, that they would not guarantee housing for the next academic year. Even so, there were absolutely incredible price increases. The largest one that we knew about was one house going up from £89 per person per week to £189 per person per week, which, when this did not sell, this was later dropped down in price.
So the responsibilities the university sets out in terms of housing in Durham are really interesting. By the end of 2027, the university has set out a number of goals, one of those being to open 4 to 6 new colleges in Durham. The idea being that the university wants to transform the percentages of students living in college versus privately. Now, currently in Durham, only 35% of students are living in college. That compares to around 70% in the universities like Oxford or Cambridge. This is an issue for a number of reasons, primarily because there is, in Durham, which is already a very small city, a huge amount of students, around 65%, 2/3 of students trying to live and rent on the private market.
And finally, PalTV interviewed City of Durham MP Mary Foy, getting her assessment of the situation, its causes, and what action can be taken by the government.
What struck me was that it's such a ludicrous way to provide housing. And, watching the scenes, I think we saw that underlines that incredible fear that students have about securing good quality and affordable housing in the city. And since that, we saw that there's a number of students who've contacted me about their experience, and that they're absolutely terrified about how they're going to, first of all, secure a decent home, and how they're going to afford the spiral in rent during a cost of living crisis. So I've written a letter with the officers from the student union to the major lettings agents, asking them why they've done this. Do they know that there's a problem? What they're going to do about it in the future? And one of the other issues that was raised with me was that some students had thought that they'd secured a house only to be informed by the letting agents that actually the landlord had taken someone who offered more. And that is just outrageous, really. So there's a lot of issues here, and I think the big one has been how the letting agents have done it this year. There used to be a scheme that the university implemented alongside the council, which was the landlord's accreditation scheme. Now that was scrapped because a lot of the landlords just didn't play ball, they didn't sign up, they didn't engage with that. But that's something that we really need to look at again. And that would be, it would mean that all landlords would play from the same rule book, work together to, for instance, advertise the houses at set times, at reasonable times. I mean, no doubt they've advertised these houses because they want to put fear into students and charge whatever they like, and cause this fear that students are just going to do exactly what you've said. They're going to sign up to properties that they haven't even seen, whether they're going to afford them or not. And so, and I must say I haven't heard anything about that. It was over a week ago, and I haven't had any response from the letting agents yet. Surprise, surprise. But it's also the reason why we need the council to get on board to see what they can do about it. They must have very shortly, though, as much information as possible, to write to the shadow minister, Matt Weston. He's our shadow universities minister, to see if we can have a debate in Parliament with my colleagues who have universities in their constituencies, because I know Durham. This hasn't just happened with Durham this year. It's been an issue in Sheffield, Manchester, other universities, which just highlights the point that it's actually sort of the letting agents and the landlords who are causing this crisis. And I've met with Jeremy Cook and Karen O'Brien, and they assured me that nobody will go without a bed. As we know, over the past decade, universities have become a business. It's now that business model of universities generating their own income. So we know that universities are going to be getting overseas students or students, well, as many students as they can for their income. So unfortunately, I'm not aware of anything that the government would be doing to curb student numbers. As we know, all further education institutions are struggling with income. And so you can see where the university are coming from in terms of needing more students. However, Durham is also, even though it's a city, it's a very small city, and that has a huge impact when you see an influx of students in the city. You know, our residents who live in Durham who are just going to be priced out of the market by the wealthier students. And we've seen that with some of the things that's happened this time, with them being priced out of being a rent war, and the landlords accepted the highest bid. So there are a number of issues. Something that has been raised with me by both students, the union, and Karen O'Brien is to raise the issue about the maintenance loans, that they're not even covering rents. So something has to be done urgently from government to look at maintenance loans again and raise them.
Durham University have released a number of statements in relation to the housing crisis. On the 28th of October, they said, "We have reassured all our students that we will support them in finding suitable accommodation either in college or elsewhere. We cannot exert control over the private rental market. We have seen some deplorable behaviour by letting agents and landlords in Durham, putting up prices above inflation and releasing properties much earlier than usual. We have put in place a package of financial support to help students through the cost of living crisis. Like many other UK universities, we were obliged by the late change in A-level grade boundaries to take in a larger than usual student cohort in 2021. We reduced our intake this academic year. We also joined Universities UK in calling for increased hardship funds and grants for UK students nationally." Following this, on the 30th of October, they released a further statement saying, "We maintain a regular dialogue with our student leaders, including Durham Students' Union representatives and Common Room presidents, through which we capture their concerns and expectations. We work together with them on solutions. We are working with Durham Students' Union. We have invested significantly in extra measures to support students who are under financial pressure. These include increases in our Durham Grant Scheme and our Student Support Fund. We have also established a housing group chaired by our Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Colleges and Student Experience, which will include our student leaders. This will ensure that we plan early and carefully for next academic year by continuing to address the current issues related to student housing." In a final statement on the 7th of November, they said, "We are very aware of the current situation. We are sympathetic to the concerns of our students with regard to seeking accommodation for 2023 to 2024. This is an important issue. It concerns us and is receiving our urgent attention. There is enough accommodation in Durham for the next academic year, based on current plans and our knowledge of the situation. Durham University will support all of its students in securing accommodation. We want to ensure our students can make informed choices as to their living arrangements without feeling under undue pressure to make decisions. This includes working with our partners, including Durham County Council, DCC, letting agents, and private landlords."
So, we've heard from activists, RMP, members of Palatinate, and most importantly, from students directly affected by the housing crisis. The consensus is that a number of factors have contributed to Durham's housing crisis, the scale of which was unprecedented. Some observers, including Durham City MP Mary Foy, have laid a significant amount of blame with estate agents in Durham. In particular, the practice of dropping houses in large batches at the start of the academic year has been seen by some to have exacerbated student panic and led to the dramatic queuing scenes that we've witnessed on the streets of Durham. Others have expressed frustration with the university and suggest that they should have considered the impact that expansion would have had on the student housing market to a greater extent. While the university claim increased student numbers were mainly a result of grade inflation following the use of teacher-assessed grades during the pandemic, it's clear that university expansion has been significant for a number of years. Some have argued that the university could have foreseen the increased pressure on the student housing market in Durham and ought to have taken greater responsibility in alleviating this pressure. Further concerns raised have related to the incredibly high cost of student housing in Durham, costs which many student maintenance loans will be unable to cover. Mary Foy emphasised the responsibility of government to further support students financially during the national cost of living crisis. Many students have told PalTV that they think estate agents have been capitalising on the captive market of Durham students to increase rents. They think some responsibility for the housing crisis lies with estate agents. As the cost of living crisis worsens, prices rise and Durham University seeks to continue its expansion, the future of Durham's housing market looks bleak.